Love is something if you give it away, give it away, give it away. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Love is something if you give it away, you end up having more. It's just like a magic penny. Save it for yourself and you won't have any. You lend it, spend it, and you'll have so many. They'll roll all over the floor. Oh, love is something if you give it away, give it away, give it away. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Love is something if you give it away, you end up having more. Now, the things that I'm going to be talking about today, if I really knew them, I wouldn't be trying to tell you. I didn't say that. Loudon Wainwright III, songwriter, poet, he said it, but it just rings so true. All these people that you see who are trying to tell you so earnestly things. So I got kind of the point where I think I'm right. Makes sense to me. But a guy that I really like one time told me, well, I still like him, but he said, "You're so full of yourself." And I knew that this is my brother. I knew that he loved me, but it kind of hurt. And he said, "You're so full of yourself." And he saw me get hurt a little bit, and he said, "But it's a great self. It's a wonderful self that you're full of." So I might be just full of myself and trying to crowd onto the YouTube scene like everybody else. Sometimes in South America, other places of the world too, India, others, there'd be trains and it's full of people who have paid their ticket. But on the top and clinging to the sides and all over the train like I don't know, like leeches on a whale. There's all these other people who don't have the money to pay and they just right on the top of the train or on the side or whatever. That's the YouTube world. The YouTube is a train, and there's a bunch of people that, you know, paid their dues. But a lot of other people are just kind of hanging on. Maybe I'm one of those people, just crowd on, see where the train takes me. But I think it's true. I've been working with these things I'm going to talk about for many years, since 1991 at least. And you can say that it's about the Bible, or at least it's about the subject matter is in the Bible, the Gospels at any rate, connections to other places in the Bible. But it's really not about that, and it's certainly not the kind of Bible talk that you often hear on YouTube or other places on the internet, as you'll discover when you go along. So if the idea of Bible turns you off, well, don't change the channel just yet. Kind of stick with me for a while and see if I don't say some things that you have never heard before. And if they don't, lighten your head up a bit. So Loudon Wainwright said that. If I really knew, I wouldn't be trying to tell you. And that still holds true, even for me. So one time in this part of the world, New Mexico, there was a guy who liked to go hiking, and he was a rock hound, an amateur geologist who loved rocks and stuff, and he loved to go hiking through these mountains and hills and bottoms, rotten bottoms like arroyos. So, and one day he finds, laying right on the surface, kind of beside the rough trail that he was following, a beautiful, beautiful Native American pot with intricate designs and beautiful colors, and it's kind of halfway in and halfway out of the dirt and the sand, and he stops and looks at it, and everything in him wants to take it home and keep it, maybe sell it, maybe put it in his collection of rocks and pieces of pottery that he's found scattered through the mountains through his many years of walking. But he also knows that the tribal people have kind of gotten fed up with gringos coming in and taking stuff and not even saying thank you, if you know what I mean. So he knows that sometimes the tribal authorities will put a beautiful piece of pottery that's just been made by some craftsman in one of the pueblos, and they'll put it out there kind of like bait or decoy, and they're watching it with binoculars and telephoto lenses, and they like to, when they spot somebody who takes it and tries to hide it and head out of there, they follow them and track them and meet them at their vehicle and arrest them. So he knows that happens, but it's a beautiful pot. And what does he do? Well, in my story, and in stories is all we have, you know, if you think about it. In this story, he takes a bunch of pictures of it, where it lies, but also close-ups and all different kind of, and he holds it to himself like he can feel the vibrations, the emotions that went into the making of this beautiful pot and the world at the time that it was made, maybe a century ago, maybe way more. He holds it to him to feel the vibes and appreciate it. And then very carefully and reverently he puts it back and goes on home. Well, I'm kind of like that guy. I found something in the Gospels. And I knew it was going to be there in some form because I'd read other rock hounds that had found this same kind of thing, going back at least to 1850 in Germany, scholars that had found this thing and studied it and analyzed it and all that. And in my opinion, they missed the point, but that's another story. At any rate, when I found it for me, I was elated, and one discovery has led to another and to another and to another. And all of these discoveries put together have given me, they've lifted a weight from me, a weight of seriousness and worry. They've filled me with the joy of really trusting that I am loved and everybody else is loved, and not just loved sort of from the outside, like, you know, the sun shines down here or a flashlight or something, but loved intrinsically, that everything about me, you, everybody is saturated, marinated in love, is intrinsically love. And that's given me a freedom and a boldness, and maybe an even smarter mouth than I had. And it given me, joy. And I've tried off and on for several years since YouTube and stuff like that became available, I've tried to sort of talk about these things I'm going to be talking about. And it's always too heavy. And it ends up being the little talks that I've given, rough drafts, you could say. It always ends up like I'm trying to convince myself of something. If I really knew, I wouldn't be trying to tell you. So to try to, and what happens also when I've made these talks is I get carried away with how magnificent it is, and I go on and on and on and on. They're not watchable. They're too long and too makes your head spin to try to follow me. Another guy told me, a guy that didn't love me, but I think he was doing his best. Anyway, he said one time, trying to talk with you is like trying to get a drink out of a fire hose. Maybe so. So I'm working at not doing that. I'm just going to talk about a little piece of it today. There'll be another time. If this works, I'll make another one, another little talk, and then another one, and so on. There's no end to it. No end. Have you ever had too much fun, or had fun that went on too long? Not really. So, the smallest and simplest way of talking about the bowl that I found, the beautiful pottery, is that many places in the New Testament and parts of the Old Testament, I guess too, I haven't spent much time studying that, but in the 4 Gospels especially, each one of them is a poem. And the poem is not the roses are red, violets are blue kind of poetry that we have, but a form of poetry that existed in the ancient world, was very common in the ancient world, and it's called chiasm, C-H-I-A-S-M. And you can look that up, and endless numbers of articles that will explain what chiasm is. They're also called palindromes. It's a literary form of the way the words or letters even are arranged so that it creates a structure. And that structure, that pattern, ring pattern as they're called sometimes, it brings out something between the two halves of it that you can't hear if you listen only to this one or only to that one. And a simple thing, which I think you can identify with, is the Viewmasters. Remember a stereopticon, they used to be called in the old days, but when we were kids we had toys called Viewmasters, and there was several other brands, and you put it's a little plastic thing like this with a couple of, and you put a card in, and the card had little pictures, little cartoons or photos, and you click the little thing and go chung, and that moved it down to the next picture, ka-chung, ka-chung, and they made flat pictures appear 3D. And they were enthralling to an 8-year-old, 6-year-old. Well, that's the way the Bible is written, the Gospels. Each one of them is a series of little 2 pictures that when you line them up through the eyepieces of the stereopticon, they come alive. And another way of hearing that, appreciating that, is in stereo music. When that came out, suddenly music wasn't just pretty, it had a shape and a depth to it and a movement. One of the first times I really heard it was the Beatles were playing, some music was from the Beatles was being played, and somebody had me lay down on the floor with my head between 2 speakers. And in that particular song, there was the sound of, it wasn't in the song, it was right after the song had finished, and it was the sound, the little bells that they put on sheep so that they can find them when they try to get lost. And the sound of the little bells moved from one side of the screen, and there wasn't any screen, moved it to the other side. It was like the sheep had crossed a road, and a whole little movie came into your mind when you listened to that. And a different movie for you and for the person next to you, somebody else, or for me. But it created something that was not there if you didn't put your head between two speakers. And of course, later on came stereo headsets and all that stuff, and you don't have to lay down on the floor. But that's that delightful three-dimensional action, something that you can hear that's not there. And that's the way the Gospels of Jesus are about. That's what they show you. They bring to life things in your mind that weren't there a minute ago. And to even try to hint at how detailed they are, I run the risk of going on and on and on. But each verse, each cluster of 3 or 5 or 7 verses or more verses in the passage of Mark, Matthew, Luke, or John, each one is shaped like that, shaped like a wedge, like a flying wedge. And there's pairs, 1, 2, 3, or 4, whatever pairs, and then at the middle there's this point. And the point looks like, you know, like when ducks are flying on the wing, and there's a lead duck, and all the rest of them are kind of, doesn't really happen in life, but there it looks like in drawings, there'll be an equal number of ducks paired off, as it were. Well, look up chiasm or palindrome, and you'll start to get the idea of that basic thing. But each little part is like that, and then this part here matches this part over here that's 6 or 7 chapters away, and then one next to it match, and the ones next to it match, and so on. And then in the middle there's this point, and the point is the main point of that whole passage of, say, a chapter to 3 chapters. And so that gives you an insight into what the story is telling you that's not clear if you're just reading it like a novel or a short story or something. It's not clear. But the Gospels have their own topography, their own inner shape, and they create these little pairs of things through the use of key words and images and the arrangement within the poem itself that goes beginning to end. So that's part of the beautiful pottery, is the way that it's actually written. And this got discovered, like I said, in 1850 in Germany, and people began working on it, and scholars and so on. But the more they go, the more things show up in it. And if you Google in chiasm in the New Testament, or chiasm in Mark, or chiasm, you'll get pieces, and they're beautiful, well done, but they're close-ups, and they show this part in great detail. And what I found when I found the whole pottery is that the whole thing is one chiasm, and the 4, Mark, Matthew, Luke, John, together make one poem, one chiasm, and it's all woven together. Incredible insight and artistry, inspiration. Some people may accuse me of not being a very good Christian. That's okay, but a human couldn't have done this by themselves. That's my opinion. The complexity and intricacy and richness, the joy that comes out from starting to perceive, and the little sheep bells that show up, and the connection between this and that part of the same gospel, or part of the 4 together, those things are just rich I used to try to tell these things in a group of pastors that I was with, other pastors of the denomination that I was a member of. We got together every Tuesday and read the texts, and I would try to explain, try to show them what this was. And there were different kind of reactions that my colleagues had to different things I tried to put out there. And I have to say that by and large, the reactions were not very favorable. Some people just thought it was kind of a waste of time, and some people thought, well, one of them said, well, this can't be right, or we would have been told about it in Symmetry. And I said, well, they didn't know. You know, there's levels of the Bible, levels of spiritual truth that are being revealed to us in these days. By these days, I mean this generation. Another guy that I ran across said, the Bible is written on 7 levels. 3 of them have been revealed to us in times past. 3 more are completely occulted from us. We can't see them. We can't understand them. And there is one that is being revealed to us in these days. That was, you know, enough to work on, I suppose, for many years, but I'm just taking it as it is. That there's a level of spiritual meaning embedded in the Gospels themselves that is being revealed to us, and we're finding out about it a little bit at a time. It's like we're reading into the paint on the beautiful pottery and seeing the levels and layers of paint. And each level shows us something new and about what most people claim to be God's Word, and they may have different understandings about what that means, and I don't want to argue about any of that stuff. I'm just telling you how wonderful it is, and hope that you will, subscribe or connect up with me again on the next one of these little YouTube talks that I do, and find out for yourself. So the way it works, in the Gospel of Matthew is the one I'll be mostly concentrating on. The Gospel of Matthew starts with a list of names: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and so on. And these are the names from the Old Testament that mostly, but not completely, fit the way the prophecy and promise of God was fulfilled. And that was that there would always be a son of Abraham on the throne of Jerusalem. That's loose language, but at any rate, it's a list of, and he begat so-and-so, and he begat so-and-so, and he begat. It's a list, supposedly, of the male ancestors of Joseph, Jesus' earthly father, and therefore his legal identity. Except that it changes. It's not, well, you have to get it one piece at a time from different talks or presentations, or looking for that pottery yourself. So at any rate, the whole book, that's the first part, the first chapter or so of Matthew, is that list of names. Except that every now and then in that list of names, there's 1 or 2 or 3 generations that are left out, that are in the Old Testament, but they don't show up in that list. And there's also a bunch of names that show up in that list that are not in the Old Testament anywhere. And there's some significant spelling changes between the Old Testament and this list in Matthew. And there's 4, and only 4, women's names in that list of the male genealogy, supposed to be male genealogy only. But there's 4 women who show up. And those women are outlaws. They're not good Jewish women. They're not good Christian women. They're not the kind of people that you'd want teaching your kids Sunday school. They're outlaws. And there's 4 that are in the list, and then the implied one, the 5th one, is Mary, who was an outlaw according to the law at that time, because she was an unwed mother. And you can get an argument, oh, no, and defend against that and use sophistry and all kind of stuff. But the point is, the gospel's written that way to shock us and to make us look at these women's lives and why they're part of the holy family tree of Joseph, father of Jesus. And looking at those women and their lives and the story will make bells go off in your head. And an aha kind of thing. Wonderful. So then the book of Matthew, here's the go by. The book of Matthew has these stories. There's 42 names over here in the sequence, and there are 42 stories in the book of Matthew that connect to that list. So that the whole of the book of Matthew is a retelling of the history that's outlined by this genealogy from Abraham to Joseph, the father of Jesus. And a way that's memorable, I don't know if it's all that completely accurate, but a way that's memorable is as God worked with the people of Israel from Abraham down to Joseph, so in your life, God is working with you through the same sequence of 42 spiritual stories. The things that happened to the Hebrews for 42 generations happens to you. And that puts your life, my life, everybody's life, in the matrix of, you could say, providence or the divine will or the mystery, the love, the joy of God. And a little voice in my head keeps saying, not to get too carried away. So there are a couple of things I want to do before I close this one. One of them is to tell you a little bit about me. I've heard 2 different versions of different teachers I had in the past. One who said that you, the audience, has a right to know who's talking to him and why, and what I want to do for you, what I want to cheat you out of. And the other one says the contents matter, not the container, and to not bother with who I am, description. It doesn't matter. You either get caught by the material, the spiritual truth and the magnetism, or you don't. And if you don't, there's no loss. It's not for you yet, maybe ever. So I got both these voices talking at me, and I'm splitting the difference by telling you a little bit about me, and hope you don't get offended by that or real interested in that either. It's just like Dylan says, oh, my name, it ain't nothing. My age, it means less. So my name is Michael, and I worked most of my life as a counselor or pastor or chaplain. I did a lot of other things, looking for oil in South America and wiring things together and a bunch of other stuff. Doesn't matter. I was a pastor in a mainstream denomination. I didn't get my diploma off the back of a comic book or anything like that for 30 years or more. And I'm grown now with the wife and kids, and it's the same wife I started off with and the same kids I started off with, and a grandchild. I can say that looking back, it looks like God prepared me for this work by giving me some gifts. One of them is foreign languages, and the other one is literary analysis. And that was all before I went to seminary in my 30s. And I can say God done that, but I can just as easily say, well, that's who I was. It was lucky it happened that way. Maybe God didn't have anything to do with it. You have to decide yourself whether you feel any inspiration for yourself in the things that I will be talking about. So, what I want most of all for you to remember is that this is fun. And if it stops being fun, for God's sake, stop doing it. It gives me great pleasure to work on these little talks. And to find connection between the material in the four Gospels, which are one Gospel, and life. The kind of life that we have here all around us. So the way it works is you look at one of the names in the sequence of so-called genealogy. Some people say it's a representative genealogy. It's what, sort of like the main points with a few glosses over. That's misleading, but at any rate, people say that. You find Abraham, and you read all of the material in Abraham, which is in the book of Genesis, and then you read the first story in Matthew. And that's the story of the dream that Joseph has. Joseph and Mary, the parents of Jesus, he has a dream, and if you go back and then you look again in Abraham material, you find that he had a dream. I used to know where it is, I forgot. And those dreams, that's the connecting point between the two halves of the chiasm. And the dream, the nature of the dream, tells us something, and it tells you something about yourself, about your spiritual nature. At one point, I think Jesus said, the flesh is nothing, the spirit is everything. And whether you believe that Jesus was the only Son of God or just a prophet, it's the truth that matters. Physical reality is not important. Spirit is what is important. So that's part of the Abraham level of the 42 names. And the next one is Isaac. And you read all their stories, but it's not very long. And then you look at the second story in the book of Matthew, and it's about the wise man, the Magi. And you go back and you see the connection between those who announced the future birth of Isaac and the Magi. And the third one connects, and the fourth one, and so on. And each of these levels connect between the story that happened back in the Old Testament and the story that is told in Matthew about the events in Jesus' life. And you get those two together, and the bells go off. And you see 3 dimensions into... and if that don't make you happy, to know that there ain't never been nothing that you ever did or that was ever done to you that can take away your happiness and your place in the intrinsic web of the universe. Nothing that can diminish you or threaten you. You're not going to go to hell, and neither is anybody else that you know and love. And that God is, there's a song from my wife's culture, which is Brazil. E a terra era criancinha ainda quando eu comecei a te amar. And while the earth was yet a little baby, I was loving you. And you can say that it's God, or you can say that it's love itself, or life. Life was loving you before the volcanoes calmed down. God was loving you. Love was loving you. Life was loving you. Since almost forever. And the more that, you can't make yourself believe that, and I can't either. But the more you just listen to that song as it's told in the Gospels, which I'll be telling here one little episode at a time, just listen to the song. The song itself will convince you. And it'll take a while, like taking homeopathic medicine instead of going to surgery. Do not be afraid, I am with you. I have called you each by name. Come and follow me, and I will bring you home. I love you and you are mine. Da 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 da. La da 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 da, la da da da, la da da. Do not be afraid, I'm with you. I have called you each by name. Come and follow me, and I will bring you home. I love you and you are mine. La da 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 da, la da da da, la da da da. See you soon. Just listen to the music.